Go. Okay, everyone has the pages. This Shabbat that's coming up is called Shabbat Chazon. Shabbat Chazon. Shabbat Chazon is always the Shabbat before Tisha B'Av. And the word Chazon means vision. A Chazon is a vision. And it's called that because we read, after the regular Torah reading, we read every Shabbat, we read what's called a Haftorah. And this Haftorah, this is classically what the Bar Mitzvah boys read. The Haftorah, and the Haftorah usually deals with something to do with the portion of the Torah that we read, the same subject matter. Or, in these cases, it talks about the time that we're in. So the Haftorah is pretty hard. It's pretty harsh. It talks about how the Isaiah the prophet is reprimanding the Jewish people, that they're big sinners and that they're terrible and that they're not listening to God and they're not listening to common sense and they're going against they're going against their own life and they're going against etc. Terrible things. Even though it ends off on a really nice note. It says, Tzion b'mishpat tepara v'shabeh v'tzedakah. It says that the Jewish people were redeemed with injustice and in mercy, and etc. Okay. But Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of the city of Berditchev, he lived at the same time as the first Rebbe of Chabad, 250 a little bit more than years ago. And they were very good friends. And he was a very, very holy person. And he said that this Shabbat is called Shabbat Chazon, not only because it is going on the Haftorah, which is called Chazon Yeshayahu, the vision of Isaiah, but it is called Chazon because on this Shabbos we have a Chazon. We have a vision. You can get a vision this Shabbos. What vision can you get? Shebeshabbat Chazon Mar'im et Beit HaMikdash HaShlishi. That this Shabbat, every Jew is able to see the third temple. Huh? Oh. Ela shazu riya merachok, but you're seeing it from far away. V'zeh tochen Shabbat Chazon. That's what it means.
So you see it, but you see it from very far away.
Very far away. Like someone wants to give you a diamond ring. A genuine diamond ring that was passed down from your forefathers. It's worth $1 million, but you say you want to see it, you go down to the bank and they show you it's behind this big glass window, and then there's another glass window, and you have to stand far away. And sometimes they have in these museums. I remember I went to a museum. My wife liked to go to these things, and we went to, I think it's in Italy. I think it must have been in Italy. Anyway, they showed the what is it? The Mona Lisa.
It's the Louvre.
The Louvre in Paris.
It's behind Boltons class.
Yeah, that's right. We were there also. We were so many places I don't even remember where we were. I just take pictures. You have no idea where you are, what you're doing. Afterwards, you analyze it. What you saw. You couldn't take any pictures here, and you have to stand on this belt. You stand on the belt, and there's this picture of Michael. Who is it? They drew it. The Leonardo da Vinci drew this picture. And it's way far away, and there's guards standing in front of it, and because there's always some nut who throws paint on it or slashes it or something. So anyway, you have to stand, and it's pretty good distance away, away from this picture. Well, here it's the same type of a thing. You see, lahavdil. You're shown the third temple, but it's shown far away.
So no one can touch it. No one can go.
So you can't mess it up. And we'll see. He brings an example. Maybe but at least you know it's there. At least you know that it's there, that there is such a thing.
How do you see it?
Huh?
How do you see it?
How do you see it? Oh, we'll see. That's what we're going to see.
When we go to sleep, we dream and there? Or
No, it's supposed to be a real thing. Listen, that's a pretty fantastic thing to say, but this is even more fantastic, according to the opinion of the Zohar, and Chabad accepts this opinion. The third temple will be built by God. In fact, it's already built. The third temple is already built. It's already built by God and already exists somewhere in heaven. And it'll manifest itself by means of the Mashiach. It is pretty hard to believe, but nevertheless, on the other hand, it's easier to believe that God himself appeared to all the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. That's even more fantastic. God himself. This is just a creation of God. This is just a holy temple. Let's say it's now spiritual and God makes it physical. We're talking about God himself, who's creating you and who's creating me. Right now, he actually appeared on Mount Sinai. It says everybody's soul on Mount Sinai, everyone's souls jumped out of their body. So what does it mean? It means we don't understand what's going on. We have no idea what's going on. But on the other hand, we are very, very important to God. Very important.
He loves us.
Right? The Jews are the most important thing that there is to God. Why? Because our job, as I said 100 times, is to put meaning into the world. To show the non-Jews how much God loves them, he creates them, and how important they are. Without the Jews, the whole thing is a big confusion. And without the Holy Temple, the Jews are confused. Let's not go back. That we learned in the morning. Says Rabbi Levi Rav Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, don't give up. The temples have been destroyed. Yes, Jews have been scattered around for almost 2,000 years. Inside of themselves and outside of themselves. So any normal person with a head on his shoulder would say, let's, forget about it. And you buy, what was it called in Bitcoin? Right, you buy Bitcoin. It's going to go up. Right? It's going to go up. Yes, you sell your house. When is it going to go up? You sell your house, sell everything. You put $2 million Bitcoin. It's going to go up. When is it going to go up? Well, in 2,000 years. What? But it's a good investment. It's a good investment. Don't pull out. Don't pull out. What are you talking about, don't pull out? Who can wait 2,000 years? We've been waiting 2,000 years for a third temple. Don't pull out. It's coming any moment. Here it comes. Who's going to be? So Rabbi Levi Berdichev says, just so that you won't be too depressed, and exactly opposite, you can be even happy. On this Shabbat, before Tisha B'Av, before we remind ourselves that we've got no temple, and the reason we don't have any temple is because of the Jewish people, or more exactly, because of one Jewish person that caused the whole thing. And who was that one Jewish person? Me. Because if one Jewish person was really the way it was supposed to be, it could change the whole thing around. So, who was that one Jewish person? You. Well, I can't control you. So Levi Yitzchak Berdichev says, we see from far away that there is such a thing as a holy temple, and it is really real, and it is worth waiting for. You ever see this? I've read this sikha a lot of times, and I've heard the saying a lot of times, and to tell you the truth,
Have you ever seen it?
I don't know. Maybe I did, and I just don't. I don't know. Could be I saw it. I mean, I'm not giving up, that's for sure. So maybe I did see it. That's what it means. Chazon Yeshayaya. You have the vision. Elish Zuba, it's far away. La'ora Amor, according to what we said. Yuv and Akesha, we can understand between this Shabbat, which is called Shabbat Chazon, and Devarim, the book of Devarim. Please. Shahari Kaviot Shabbat Chazon always comes on this week's Torah reading, which is called Devarim. What's Devarim? Is the first Torah portion in the book of Deuteronomy. We talked about this a little bit before, that the whole book of Deuteronomy, Moses said it from himself. He said it on his own. but it was God speaking through him. Whole different way of revealing what God wants. But Parshat Devarim, Niftach Seder Mishnah Torah. This opens up now what's called the repetition of the Torah. That's what Deuteronomy means, I guess, in English. Deuto means two. Anami means
Second.
That's Deuto is the second. What's Anami mean? Who knows? Astronomy. Deuteronomy.
Study of the second.
Of Deuters. Astronomy is the center of the astros of the heavens. Astronomy. So this is Deuto. Anyway, let's go. But Parshas Devarim, Niftach Sefer Mishnah Torah Limrosha Hakol Torah Achas, even though that all the 5 books of the Moses are exactly the same, but this one is a little bit different. Why? Mishnah Torah Chumashim, but the 5th book of the Torah is different from the 4 that preceded it. How? Shem Mishnah Torah was said to a generation that was coming into the land of Israel. And because of that, it was necessary Lazir, to warn B'kesher L'Inyanim Mesuyamim Shemitchila Lo Ayatzorech Lazir. There had to be certain warnings about things at the beginning. You didn't have to warn about them. Maybe sit over here, Yonah. Maybe it's that. Okay. V'shoni Shabein Dor Amidbar, the Dor Shenichnas La'aretz. What's the difference between the generation that was in the desert and the generation that came into the land of Israel? What are you doing there? What's something wrong? Okay, good. The generation that was in the desert, they were called Dor De'ah. They were a generation that knew God. And the people in the desert, all the Jews in the desert, they wandered in the desert for 40 years, right? Where did they get their food from? God. There were no grocery stores. Where did they get their clothes from? Clothes grew with them, miraculously. Clean clothes. They wore the same clothes for 40 years or however long, and they were clean. And they grew with them. As they grew, there were little baby head that grew up, and it looked good. Must have. I mean, they didn't. No one complained. They complained about the food. They never complained about their clothes. Water. They had water from. In other words, they were protected. They had everything that they needed. There were no water bills. There was no electrical bills. There was no serving in the army. But everything. The streets were clean. What?
They were always serving.
In the desert, nobody to fight. What were they fighting in the desert? It says that the clouds killed all their enemies.
And you wonder why they wanted to give.
There was, what says one time, Amalek attacked them. It was rare, right? They fought Sichon and Og, but it was very rare that they had the 40 years they were in the desert, and they won all their battles, no problem.
And you wonder why they didn't want to leave that. It was not.
Yeah, who wants to leave a thing like that, right? Those people were in the desert. They saw God. It's not that they were put into some sort of what is it called, aged home for the aged, or what is it called, something care, intensive care, something like that. Anyway, assisted living. Oh, assisted living, right? They were taken care of by God Himself. God wanted them to be in the desert. God gave them food. God provided for them. They were with God every single second, thanking God and talking to God and seeing God and feeling God. Great. When they came into the land of Israel, as Kavar Bo Bamaga and Magashmis, all of a sudden now they're going to have to plow, they're going to have to plant, they're going to have to worry about, is the rain going to come, is it not going to come? Enemies are on every side. Leficha chasra la'em hariya belukus. Therefore, they started getting selfish. They went into the land of Israel. A person thinks about himself, which is pretty natural. It's okay. But they stopped feeling God. They were not open to God. They had worries. In the desert, there were no worries. You went into the land of Israel, there are worries. Leficha chasra la'em hariya belukus. Therefore, because they were so worried, they couldn't see godliness. L'didam lo yata ela shmiya bilvad. All they had was hearing. Ata Yisrael Shema. They could only understand what it said in the Torah, but they couldn't see what it was talking about. Ha'hevdel ben riyah l'shmiya, the difference between hearing and seeing is riyah davar masuyam eno mugbala. When you see something, your certainty of it is unlimited. Ein bo mitzarim v'hagbalos. There is no limitation. In other words, misha adam. When a person sees something, shuv lo yazizo shum davar mimakomo. You can't move anything from its place. Lahachdir bo sfekos b'davar, to put any doubts into the thing. Right? You see the rabbi emptying out the people's pockets in the mikveh, pickpocketing everybody going in the mikveh. You see, and that's it. You're finished. I saw the rabbi take it. No, he wasn't taking it with him. These were only it was his children. He wanted to check on the children. What are you talking about? It was his children. He pickpocketed everybody in the whole entire mikveh. He pickpocketed me, the rabbi. And I see he's driving around a brand new car. Where did he get that from? No, he's got investments and everything. What are you talking about? I saw it with my own eyes. When you see something, it's different. Someone could say, okay, maybe you saw it, but I didn't see it. Say, okay, you've got a point. You have a good point. But I did see it, and I know what happened. Since you saw it, there it is, baram bad. When you hear something, even though that you understood it very well, this other person who says, yes, I understand what you're saying. You saw the rabbi take money from the pockets. Okay, I understand what you're talking about. But nevertheless, alul adavar lihir arer be'emsur kushya. But maybe there can be a big question in your mind, right? Someone comes along and says, how do you know the rabbi wasn't looking for weapons in people's pockets? Could be. Say, yeah, but this guy told me that he took money out of the pocket. You can believe him? You know who that person is? He's the biggest liar. He's the biggest liar in the... If anybody's the thief, who is the thief? All of a sudden, if you hear it, right? Just hearing it, all of a sudden there can be all sorts of doubts. That's why in Jewish court, anyway, testimony that you heard from someone is not good testimony. If someone comes and says, I saw Joe borrow $100 from Sam, then he himself, you saw it, you have to go and testify. If
only one person validates it too.
If you go and you say to somebody else, go to court and tell them that I saw somebody, the testimony is not valid.
It's not valid
In regular court also, could be right. That there has to be two witnesses, that's different. One witness is enough to, in some cases, one witness is sufficient, but one witness is enough to obligate a vow, to make the person swear. That, right? Do you swear you didn't take any money from him? I swear. That's it. A lot of people don't like to take oaths. But nevertheless, seeing someone, when you see something happen, that's 100% proof. That's what? Sometimes it could be that a person was, you realize a person was drunk. Huh?
Like you said, he was checking his children's things.
Pocket, right, could be.
And he didn't know which one was...
You don't know the motive, yes. Lefichach, therefore, so if so, what are we talking about this for? The people that were in the desert saw God. They had no doubts that God existed. The people coming into the land of Israel, they only heard about it from Moshe and heard about it from everyone else. They didn't see actual godliness. Now they're going to go into the land of Israel. They're going to have to work for their food. They're going to have to dig for their water. They're going to have to protect themselves. They're going to have to do it all, and God's not going to do it for them. Lefichach, therefore, the Mishnah Torah, when it says about the generation that came into the land of Israel, they only heard about God. They have to command them on new commandments. For instance, self-sacrifice. That you have to sacrifice your life for God. Devarim shedora midbar, the things that in the generation of the desert, lo ayat tzarich l'tzavot ulazhir aleim. You didn't have to worry about them. No one had to sacrifice their life in the desert. Im zot, maybe you had to sacrifice your comfort a little bit, maybe. Okay, im zot limerod she'ador shenichnas la'oretz, even though that the generation that had left Egypt and wandered in the desert. They died away, and now there's a new generation that was not by Mount Sinai. They did not see God. Now they're coming into the land of Israel. They're a lower level than that of the generation that was wandering for 40 years. But, true, the people going into the land of Israel are a lower level. They have less certainty in God's existence and God's willingness to help them, etc., God's ability to help them. But some way they were better than the generation that left Egypt. Why? I'm sorry, I lost the place. Oh, Yitron, okay. Allah Ne'amar, and it says, Lagabi Dora Midbar, and the generation that was in the desert, that they saw godliness and they ate from godliness. Kilo ba'atem arata el amanucha ve'el anachala. You are wandering in the desert, you have not come to the promised place that I promised you. This is just a preparation. You're not in real life yet. The people in the desert were not living a real, true life. In some ways, it was a virtual life. Why? Because the tabernacle wasn't permanent. The tabernacle was moving. The holy temple that they carried around with them was not permanent. Later on, it came to Shiloh and then to Jerusalem after they came into the land of Israel. After they came into the land of Israel, it was 440 years until they built the first temple. King Solomon built the first temple. 369 of those years were in a place called Shiloh. There was a tabernacle like it was in the desert, something like that, but it had walls of stone. V'atam lakach, the reason is, mishum shedavka mitocha yerida atzmo. How is it that only when they reached the land of Israel, this is the place where God wanted? How can it possibly be? When they were in the desert, that was what God wanted. God protected them, God fed them. There's no bigger sign that God's love. In the desert, He embraced them. They sat and they learned Torah uninterruptedly all day, and they were with Moses, the greatest teacher of all time. Never been such a yeshiva as that. It was good weather. They didn't need no snakes. No, there's good food. Oh, they complained about the food. Maybe there wasn't not enough variation, but they
had a water problem.
But nevertheless, that was not the goal. The goal is land of Israel. Why? Even though the land of Israel, they did not see godliness. They only heard about it. But why is it Israel greater? Because only from descent, coming down, that the Jewish people began to start working in the real physical world, but darga nechutot, and even the lowest levels of the physical world, nitna is dominant. There was given the possibility to really do what God wanted. That's why it's called menucha v'nachala. The land of Israel, that's the only place where there could be the temple. Why? Because the land of Israel was low. Not because it was so high. The desert was high. When they were in the desert, that was perfect. Perfect. They didn't have any problems. They didn't have any difficulties. There were no obstacles. There was no failure. Everything was wonderful. You got what the food you wanted. It says that the manna could taste like everything. It says everyone was rich. It said in the manna there also came jewels with the manna. And the Jewish people were at peace with one another, at peace with God. What could be better than that? Says the Rebbe coming into the land of Israel. In the land of Israel, it's terrible. It's awful. There's all sorts of enemies, and you have to deal with getting food and getting your water and protecting yourself, and right, dealing with all these anxieties and pressures. Who wants to be in the land of Israel? Says God, you do. The land of Israel, the desert was lacking one big thing.
Couldn't do
And
Torah.
what?
You couldn't do Torah.
You could, sure. You couldn't do the commandments.
The commandments, okay.
The commandments weren't to the same level. Okay, but you could do whatever you could do. What can you do? You do what you can. It says, the onus Rahman Patri. If a person is unable to do a commandment, then he's exempt from doing the commandment.
But if you're in Israel, you can do it.
In Israel, you can do. So don't go into Israel. Well, you have to go into Israel. So you stay in the desert, and everything is wonderful. As it says the Rebbe, in Israel, there's the doing the commandments, but there's something even more. In Israel, what is there? In Israel, there is what do you want to call it? Victory. There is a battle. There are battles to be fought that you didn't have in the desert. God fought all your battles for you. In the desert was a nation of sissies. They didn't have to fight. They didn't have to this. Their mother was hugging them. You keep away from my son. You never touch him again. Right? And so the Jewish people, they never had to worry about anything, particularly in the desert. And everything they wanted. They came to the land of Israel, and now they have to worry. You really have to worry? You don't have to worry, but if you choose to, you can worry. But for sure, one thing is, in Israel, you have responsibility. In the desert, there was no responsibility. They just had to learn Torah, and they did. Says the Rebbe, the land of Israel, because the land of Israel, there was a challenge. There was overcoming obstacles. In the desert, they didn't have that. So it comes out that's the whole idea of Devarim, this book of Devarim. It has two opposites. Number one, a tremendous descent, because now this is the generation that's about to go into the land of Israel. Moshe is saying this. And number two, Davka mitoch harida, only from this descent comes the true elevation. That's who you realize who you really are. Inyan zeh, that's what it means, giving God pleasure. You give God pleasure. Ve'inyan zeh gam b'Shabbos chazon. This is also in this week's portion, Shabbat chazon, the Shabbat of vision. Two opposites on one side. Chala Shabbazo b'Tisha Ayamim. It falls in the 9 days. But even more, it is the Shabbat right before Tisha B'Av, worst day of the year. We remember the destruction of the temple. And as we said before, when the temple was destroyed, so millions of Jews were killed. It says that there were rivers of blood, that a horse couldn't stand up. The current was so strong of blood. It says in the Gemara. Terrible. And even more, the Jews were scared. The remaining Jews, they were scattered all over the world. They were taken away from their home. So it's as bad as you can get. Says the Rebbe, nevertheless, even though it's the lowest time, but by means of this descent will come the ultimate elevation. That's what Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Rebbe said, that on this Shabbos we show the third temple. The third temple will be much, much, much higher, greater, more spiritual than the first two. It will be built speedily in our days by means of the Mashiach. That's what the Rambam says. The Mashiach will build the third temple. There's the thing about Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Rebbe, if I can just tell you in a short way, which is very beautiful. Yeah, I'll tell you, we'll do this the second one also. Remind me of the parable of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Rebbe with the child with the 3 coats. I told you about this? Did I tell you about this? Child with the 3 coats. Okay, I'll tell it now because, this next one is short. I'll tell it anyway. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Rebbe said that on this coming Shabbat, we can see the Holy Temple from far away. So what is it like? So once upon a time there was a king, and he had a son that he loved, and he gave the son a very beautiful and expensive suit. And the son promptly took the suit and went to his room and tore the thing to shreds. And he brought it to his father. So his father, waited a little while for him to get a little maybe mature, and he reprimanded him and said, you shouldn't do that again. It was very expensive. And I gave the son, says, okay. So he goes and he gives the son a second shirt. And the second shirt, the son stamps it in the mud and sets it on fire or whatever he does. So God says, the son's father says, that's terrible. I'm taking it back. So he takes it back. But the father, he says, listen, I want to give my son a shirt, but we see what happens every time I give it to him. So he says, the third one, I'm going to just show it to you. I'm showing it to you from far away. And when you can appreciate it, I'll give it to you. This is the same thing. God gave us a holy temple. We didn't appreciate it, so God destroyed it, took it back. It's called Mishkan. It's called the Mishkan. Mishkan. Mishkan, it means a mashkon. A mashkon means collateral. Right? You borrow $1,000 from me, and you give me your car collateral. So God took the holy temple as collateral, that the Jewish people would start paying him back what they owe him. So the first temple, God took it as a mashka. You're not acting right. Act nice, I'll give it back to you. The second temple, God built the second temple, said, I'll take it. Jews didn't do it, I'll take it back. The third temple, God said, I see that these Jews are not they don't get the point. But on the other hand, I love them, I want to give them so he shows it far away. That's what Levi Yitzchak Udisha says. He holds it up and he shows it far away, so you should know there is such a thing. Improve your ways, and you get it. You get the third temple. But in order to really, this makes any sense, you have to understand what the third temple is. Say, don't give me the third temple. What do I care? Such a big deal. Like we learned in the morning, the third temple is the real, true identity of the Jewish people. Let's look, base. Dover kama pamim. Okay, you with me, Herschel? Dover kama pamim al kach sha'atzvus shel beinas mitzorim enu tzarichen lios b'Shabbos. That if you're sad in these 3 weeks, don't do it on Shabbat. The 3 weeks are from Yud Zayin Tammuz until Tisha B'Av. That's when these 3 weeks were the whole process of the destruction of the temple. Even though some say it was a lot more. It was Yud Zayin Tammuz of 1 year and Tisha B'Av of the next year. I read that. In any case, it doesn't make any difference. These 3 weeks are not lucky times. And it's a time where you're sort of, not in the happiest mood. But you want to do that, but don't do it on Shabbat. Okay, Herschel? But Shabbat zu tzorich liot b'simcha. On this Shabbat, you have to be very happy. Even more than all the other Shabbats. Kadei shelo yevatzer, that there should not be chashash, any even worry, and a little sign that there's a lack of happiness on Shabbat because of the destruction of the temple. In other words, Shabbat is supposed to be a day when you forget about all of your troubles. So this Shabbat, it's very possible that if a person understands a little bit what the Holy Temple was, and you understand about how terrible it is that you don't have one. There's people in the world, in India, in these places, they don't have houses. There's people in India, I understand, in Delhi. I was in India, but I didn't see these people. They live on the streets. Mamish on the streets. They don't even have tents or anything. I guess when it gets cold, they just move to another place where it's warmer or something. And it doesn't bother them. They're just happy. Even in Africa, right? In South Africa, there's people, but they live in these tin houses or something like that. They have something around them. These people out in the streets, just out in the open, huh?
Like homeless people.
Homeless families, though. People that have families. A lot of people that are homeless, they become homeless after a while. They were brought up in a family, and then they didn't get a job, or they became drunkards or something, and they weren't employable. They couldn't find anything. So, eventually they slept on a park bench one night, and then they slept another night, and then I just sort of, but they started off having a place to be. At least when they were young, they went to school, they did something. These are people that from the day they're born until the last day of their life. Why is it? Because they just don't know what a house is. They don't really miss having a house.
My son, one day, all this will be yours. That's the shit.
What?
One day, my son, this all be yours. The guy's in India. They got nothing.
I don't understand.
No house. He's telling his son one day,
all
this will be yours.
Right, yeah. The people in India, they sleep out on the streets, right? So they have absolutely nothing. So what can the father tell his son in India? He says, my son, one day I'm going to pass away and all of this will be yours. Right? He has nothing. You have to understand the sense of humor. After a while you understand all sorts of people. But that was not actually a bad joke. Okay, let's go. Mishum kach, because of this. So it's the same thing. The Jewish people, we don't have a house. We're homeless. 2,000 years we've been living out in the streets, wandering around, and we don't care. It doesn't make any difference. Says the Rebbe, why did God do this? Because after this terrible exile and loss of identity that we have, after this there is a tremendous elevation, even higher than it was before. Ma yatzorech bagalus. I'm sorry. We skipped a paragraph. From the very top. I'm sorry. My finger slipped all the way down. Okay, let's go. Hahezber ledavar b'chinato hapanimit. Let's understand why is it that this Shabbat you cannot show any sign of sadness. It has to be a Shabbat where you really make an effort to be happier than the rest of the year. Why? This Shabbat in general is like the world to come. Yom Shekul Shabbat. When we're talking about the world to come, we're talking about this world, how it's going to be in the days of the Mashiach. And the future redemption will be in such a way that there will not be any trace of exile. Therefore, there's no place on this Shabbat, because this Shabbat in general, is like the future redemption. And what's the future redemption? Future redemption, what can it be likened to? A healthy person, a person that's healthy. Healthy, I don't know if it's, but God forbid if you're ever sick, when you get healthy after being sick, it's sort of hard to relate to being sick. How was it? I really couldn't walk. I really couldn't, I remember how sick. It's a little bit sort of, and it's not healthy to keep relating to how it was. You can be thankful to God or whatever. It says a truly healthy person, he doesn't think about what was. A truly healthy person. A truly healthy person is a person he just is healthy. Just healthy. There's no possibility of being sick. It says that's what's going to be spiritually for the Jewish people. Therefore, this Shabbos, there should be nothing whatsoever that has any indication of the opposite of happiness. Why then does the Shabbos have to be more happy than other Shabboses? That's what we said. This Shabbos has to be even more happy. It is known that the redemption that's going to be after this exile is higher than it was beforehand. Same thing like a person who's healthy and he was sick. When he gets healthy, he appreciates health more. And he does more to preserve his health. And it could be that because of this he gets stronger. I know there was a story about a person, people say that they know that's a well-known person, I don't know who exactly it was, but he was paralyzed. And he went in his backyard and he pulled himself up. I guess he was from the waist down, he was paralyzed. He pulled himself up, and he had a fence that went all the way around this house, and he would just force himself, drag himself from, foot by foot around this thing until finally he sort of balanced himself on his feet, and finally sort of artificially moved his feet, and eventually he started to really move his feet. His feet started to move, and eventually he realized he got the whole idea of sort of overcoming difficulties, and he became a track runner. He became like an Olympic track runner, right? Which most people haven't the ability to do this. So sometimes it can be an advantage that comes from something bad. But a person that was in prison and he gets out, he values his freedom more. If you would return this person back to the way he was, to be sick, I'm sorry. If a person was healthy and then he became sick and then he became well again, if you just returned back to the way it was before he was sick, so it's like there was no real purpose to the sickness. No purpose to the sickness. Okay, so there was no purpose. He says, no, everything that God does has a purpose. If something bad happened, there must be a lesson there. There must be something to be gained from difficulties. You with me, Yona? Oh, you have the paper? So, like it's known, Soser al Manas Livnot, a binyan shel Achri Astira, Gadol Mikafi Shoyel Livnei Astira. On Shabbat, you're not allowed to destroy things. But that's only if you're destroying it in order to build something better. But if you're just destroying for the sake of destroying, it's not really called destroying. In other words, the purpose of the destruction of the temple, is there a purpose or not? Says the Rebbe, there's a purpose to everything. God never does anything for nothing. Everything that is done for you. God does not do things to you.
So if Hashem makes you sick, then that's something Hashem is doing for you, not to you?
That's right. Yes. And there's a lesson to be learned from everything that God does. Right. That's sick. There must be something to be learned.
Something is being done to them. They're getting cancer. They're sick.
Right. There's two ways of looking at it. Either you can look at something that's happening to me, and there's no purpose to it at all. I'm a victim. Victim. Watch it so it doesn't spill over. I'm a victim. And some people look at themselves their whole lives as victims. Things happen to me, terrible things. Oh, it always happens to me. Why do I always lose? Or you can say this thing's happening for me. There's a lesson to be learned here.
If there's nothing good out of that.
What if?
There's nothing good out of being sick.
Not so.
There's nothing good out of having.
In the story of the...
Everything that happens, there's something good that can be learned from it. Everything.
There's nothing good out of it.
Well, no, you have the story of the Rebbe. The story of the Rebbe is locked up. He gets out.
Yeah, come in.
He says he would never take any money. He'd never want to do it again, but you couldn't give enough money to not
Right.
have the experience. So this is the same thing.
Let me just finish this one lesson, and then Rabbi Dan will take over, and we'll continue this tomorrow. You asked the question, or you just to ask a question, or do you want the answer also? Not so important. A question, you ask a question.
Sometimes it's just a patch on the tuchus to get you going in the right way.
So everything that happens in the world, you can look at the world in two ways. The world is just arbitrary, it's a jungle, or Hashem does everything. If Hashem does everything, then we Jews have a message to the world that Hashem is good. There's no secret that there's a lot of bad things that happen in the world, and there's no secret that a lot of bad things happen to the Jews. And the destruction of the temple is perhaps the worst of them all. Right? Certainly, arguably, worse than the Holocaust. Not certainly, but arguably worse than the Holocaust. But let's not forget, let's take the Holocaust itself. Right? Did God do the Holocaust? Yes. Does that mean that God is bad? No. Why? How can I explain what the Holocaust is? So he says, you're right, 100%. You're right. We don't have any explanation. Nobody can explain it. But eventually Mashiach will come and we'll understand. We'll understand that it was the best thing in the world. And the Rebbe gave an example. And he said a person walks by a hospital and he decides to go into there's an amphitheater where there's operating room. So he goes and he looks and he sees there's men with masks on and they're cutting into this poor person that's laying down there. He's like a fish. They're about to cut him open. So a person who doesn't know what's happening will say that this is terrible. This is the worst thing. Really, this person has been waiting for years for this operation. It's the best thing that could possibly happen to him. Right? But because you don't see the whole picture, so therefore you think it's a terrible thing. Okay, now on the other hand, of course, the Holocaust is terrible. We pray every day that there shouldn't happen bad things. That's why we pray. What's the idea of praying? We pray so that God will bless the years. We say, oh, listen, whatever case sarah, whatever happens, that's God's will, and we just have to accept it. It's the best. No. The reason that we pray is because we say, God, true, everything is good, but why do we have to suffer? Why do we have to suffer? And the Rebbe did somersaults that the people would not suffer. There was nobody that came to the Rebbe and said, Rebbe, I'm sick. And the Rebbe said, this is God's will. It's a good thing that you're sick. Accept it. Right? The Rebbe gave blessings. He did all sorts of miracles that people, all of a sudden, the disease went away and the growth went away and the blind could see and hear, right? And the deaf could hear. So, if everything that God does is for the good, so let the guy be blind, let him be deaf, let him be sick. What's the problem? So the answer is that, yes, we don't understand anything, but suffering is not a good thing. Suffering is not good. There can come something good out of it. Later on, we'll see why it was a good thing. Right? This guy went in for an operation, so really the operation was good. He's been waiting for a year for a heart transplant, so really it was a really good thing. But it would be really much better if he didn't have to go in for a heart transplant. Or if it would have been better, let's say people went to the Holocaust. Like I said this a lot of times. Professor Viktor Frankl said that the Holocaust made more people. He went through the Holocaust. Made more people religious than it did people not religious. So because a fire, if it's a strong fire, if the wind blows on it, the fire becomes bigger. So the people that really believed in God, so they went and they said, okay, why are the Nazis, why are they killing people? I don't understand it, but I have to have more faith in God. More faith in God. Okay, you can say the person is a fool. Right, what does he have faith in God for? Here, look, you see the situation is terrible. No, what's the alternative? To say the situation is terrible and to die. Right? He says, listen, even just to fake it, to imagine that there is a good God and it is, and that keeps you alive, it's worth it, isn't it? But the fact is that God really does exist and He really is good. And you can attach yourself to this fact. The truth is greater than our understanding.